Welcome to part 2, guys, and in this part, as promised, I'll be taking you through the JavaScript, the jQuery code, and this was the gallery that we had created, right? So let's talk about the JS file. The nextprep.js file linked to the nextprep.html file through line number 26 that ties up both these files together. Okay, so what I've done is, guys, I've just kept the document .ready function inside the JS file, and I've actually deleted everything else. Okay, and I'm gonna insert chunks of code slowly and evenly, and we'll understand how the JS actually affects the HTML CSS file. Okay, upfront, the document when the DOM has actually initialized and the document is actually ready, I would want buttons inside the gallery div to hide themselves instantly. So that's an instant hide. Okay, so if I were to save the document and if I were to bring the browser up and if I were to refresh, you can actually see there are no buttons because the buttons have actually hidden themselves. Okay, very cool. Next, let's insert some more code. Okay, now out here I'm actually saying in line number 4, if somebody actually hovers over the gallery is basically the div. Yeah, so you see inside the opening and the closing body tags we have a div with an ID of gallery. Gallery contains all the 3 pictures: cherry, orange, strawberry. Okay, so I'm saying out here if somebody actually hovers has 2 functions inside people. When you mouse when the mouse enters and when the mouse leaves, so corresponding functions are always given in the JavaScript file, the JS file. Okay, so when somebody hovers over the main wrapper gallery, okay, I would want the buttons to fade in over half a second, 2.4 opacity, and the corresponding functions when the mouse button actually leaves the gallery area, I would want it to fade to, so fade to a 0, you know, completely transparent, and 40% transparency out here. Okay, so I've used the fade to function. This is the time argument, this is the opacity argument. So let's see what this actually does, and let's bring the browser up, let's do a refresh. Okay, notice that the buttons show up at 40%. These 2 buttons, you can hardly see them, right, at 40% when I hover over the gallery area, the main division, and when I actually hover off, they disappear. It's very difficult to actually see them, right, but I'm sure you can actually make out. See, the previous and the next buttons actually appear. Okay, very cool. Okay, let's insert some more code. Line number 9 says when somebody actually hovers over the buttons in the gallery area, the gallery is actually the div, somebody hovers over that. Again, 2 functions inside people. Hover event handler actually carries 2 functions inside, corresponding functions. One is for mouse enter, the other is for mouse leave. Okay, so when somebody enters the button area, fade to a complete opacity, you know, 1 opacity number 1 in 500 ms or half a second. And if somebody leaves the mouse area, you know, this should be 500, beg your pardon, and again in half a second. Make sure that you reset the opacity to 40%, 0.4 opacity. So if I were to save the document up and bring the browser up, if I were to actually refresh, if I hover over the gallery area, you see the buttons throw up, and if I actually, you know, mouse over any of the 2 buttons, you see they kind of light up, right, they regain their full opacity, which is 1. Opacity is between 0 and 1. Cool. Let's actually throw in more code. Okay, this should be 500. Okay. Now the next few lines of code actually says makes the first image show and the rest hide. This is happening out here. Okay, now what's happening is we have 3 images, if you remember, but they actually, because of this rule, they tuck themselves under each other. Position absolute inside a gallery area, which is relative, they tuck themselves under each other. Okay, so what I'm saying is all the three images have a class of gallery. If you remember, I can show it to you, class of gallery, if you remember, right? What I'm saying is that the first of the three images add a class of active, and for everything else use the hide method in jQuery. So except the first image, hide all the other images. But since the first image of the gallery class is active, show itself. So basically hide the first image, hide everything else but the first image. So make the first image show up and the rest hide. So this is what these three lines of jQuery actually tell us to do. Okay, so if I were to save it at this point, and if I were to bring the browser up, and since all the images actually it's a stack, it's a pile, you can't see that the other two have actually hidden themselves, but you can be absolutely sure they have. Okay, if I were to temporarily go out here, in fact, let's assume that they have actually hidden themselves. Okay, let's throw in some more code. Okay, right. Now I've actually thrown in the code for the previous button. Which is the previous button? This is the previous button, the prev button, this button. There are two buttons with class prev and class next. Okay, now if somebody clicks on the prev button, run an anonymous function. Now this is a little this can get a little confusing out here. So if you remember, there were three pictures. The first one acquired a class of active and hence showed up. The other two acquired a class of no class actually, and hence they were actually hidden. First was showing up, the two were hidden. Now if somebody clicks on the prev button, function for the previous button, remove the class active. Okay, so the class active which was actually attached to the first picture, remove it, and then add to it, replace it with was active class. So the first picture which had a class of active, make it have another class of was active. Okay, and there's an if conditional out here in line number 23. It says if was active, the image, actually initially the first image is the gallery's first image, which initially upfront it will be. Sorry. Okay, so there's a check out here in line number 23. If the image which has a class of was active is the first image of the gallery, which actually it is. If that is the case, then run whatever is in line number 24, whatever is in curly braces, gallery dot last. So what this actually means is gallery has three pictures, pick up the last picture of the three and then add the class active to it. Or else, just in case the was active image is not the first image, otherwise make sure that whichever image actually carries the class was active, go one step behind, prev, go to the previous image and add the class active to it. Okay, so if was active is the first image, go to the last image, give it the class active. If it's not the first image, or second or the third image maybe, in which case go to the previous image and give it the class active. Little twisted, little complex, I understand that. And once you do that, call a function fade in out. Okay, so let's bring in the function fade in out, and let me just do that. This is the function in line number 30, fade in out. This is 500 actually. Okay, fade in out. Now fade in out says whichever image has the class of was active, remove the class was active, no longer needed, and out of the three images which have a class of gallery, fade them out, but leave the only image that has a class of active, and rest every other image you should fade out, and the one with the class of active you should fade in. So if I were to save the document up, bring the browser up, let's do a refresh. So I've added this, see the prep button actually light up. I've added the code only to the prep button, not to the next button. So I'm only going to test the prep button. So you see it's actually cycling through beautifully. Okay, let's go back. I know the truth is a little twisted, a little complex. You may need to bang your head with the monitor a few times, have a few cashew and salmons, whatever. Think, ponder hard, put on your logic cap, and you will crack it. Okay, let's bring in some more code. Right. So now I've actually brought the code for the next button, function for the next button. Okay, so a click handler is actually attached, or a click handler is actually attached to the next button. What this actually says is something similar. Okay, this again needs to go back to 500. Okay, never mind. This is the code for the next button. So initially, if you remember, we had given the class active to the first image, and that image showed up, and rest everything actually hid itself. Okay, so I'm saying, as I said, people, you may not understand it in the very first go. You may need to think and ponder hard. I would suggest you write down all the code and spend some time thinking over it. Okay, here I'm saying whichever image has the class active, remove the class active and add a class was active when somebody clicks on the next button. There are two buttons which have a class of active and next and pref. Okay, that's the first step. And there's a check out here in line number 32. If was active is the gallery's first image, last image. If that is the case, then the galleries, the different images which have a class of gallery, make sure you pick up the first image, add a class of active to it. Or else, if was active, which is a class, the images which have a class of was active is not the gallery's last image, in which case the next image should be added the class of active, and then run the same function, fade in out. Right. And fade in out we have already seen. Where is it? Here it is. Yeah, fade in out, make sure that the whatever has the class of was active, the class is actually removed. Remove class was active, and all the images in the gallery should fade out except the one which has a class of active should fade in. And that's the end of the document, and that's it, guys. That's it. So if I save it up, okay, if I bring the browser up, if I actually refresh, and if I mouse over, you see the two buttons come up. They light up when I actually hover. They do the next, and the pref. They cycle through, they loop through very nicely. That's a fade in, fade out effect, guys. Alright, and understand the code may not make sense in the very first instance. Okay, let me quickly sum it up, the JS file. Maybe now it'll. So up front we actually hide all the buttons, all the two buttons. Okay, but when somebody actually hovers over the gallery area, the main division which holds the three images, then I would want the buttons to fade to a 40%, but hide themselves to set the opacity to a 0 when somebody actually leaves the gallery area. What is the gallery area that I'm talking about? Div with an ID of gallery. Okay, and I'm also saying if somebody actually hovers over the different two buttons which are in the gallery division, if somebody hovers, again two corresponding functions, hover, one for a mouse enter, one for a mouse leave. So if somebody enters the button area, fade to a full opacity, or else fade out to 40%. This is the opacity, this is the time period. Okay, next what I'm doing is make the first image show up and the rest right. Hide. So I'm using the first traversing method out here. Gallery, all the three images have a class of gallery. The first image, add a class active. Okay, hide all the other images apart from the ones which actually have the class active. Show them up. The first will show, the rest will hide. Okay, let's continue. So we've added a click handler to the prep and also added a click handler to the next buttons. Okay, I'm saying whatever has the class of active should lose that class but acquire a class of was active, and check if was active is the gallery's first image. If it is so, then make sure that the last image, so that is the looping happening, acquires a class of active, or else the previous image acquires a class of active, and run fade in out. Fade in out actually says, which is says that was active should lose the class was active. All images which are class of gallery should fade out. Ones with the class of active should fade in. Okay, so at any given point of time, only one images of the three will actually have a class of active, and rest all the images will fade out, but only the one which has a class of active will fade in. Okay, at any given point of time, only one will have, which will keep on changing. Okay, similar function attached to the button next, a click handler. So whatever has a class of active, lose the class, add a class of was active. Check if was active is the gallery's last image. If it is so, make sure that the gallery's first image gets the class of active, else make sure that the next image next to the was active class gets the image of gets the class of active, and then run the fade in out. Fade in out again says remove class was active from was active. The gallery, basically images with class gallery, should fade out. Images with class active should fade in. So in simple terms, people, even if you have more than 3 images, the code, the JS code wouldn't change at all. It'll just be the same. Okay, so the logic here is like this. If there are 3 images, initially the first one will get the class active, the rest 2 will not get it, and whichever has the class active shows, the other 2 actually hide themselves, and then the class active actually shifts to from the first to the second one, then from the second to the third one. But once it goes to the third one, it checks if it is actually the third one, it goes back to the first one, and a similar function is carried out for the prep button. So people, this is the final product. Okay, as I said, you may not understand the logic initially, but just go through the code slowly, evenly, spend some time, scratch your head, you'll get it. Okay, so next, prep, a fade and fade out. Okay, so guys, I hope you found this information useful. You have a good day. Bye bye. Peace.